Bonjour et bénez-vous. Les Wicked Webs We Weave podcast. Je m'appelle Ryan Mckern. Bonsoir. And welcome to the Wicked Webs We Weave. I'm your host, Ryan Mckern. Join us weekly for tales of haunted history, paranormal, ghost stories, all things horror. Warm yourself to the proverbial fire, dim the lights, and welcome to the Wicked Webs We Weave. A walk of shame, blurry vision. The sarcophagus within the mind, hazy shade of winter. Least we be expected, the road ahead. Take this elixir for your symptoms. It was a very warm and muggy July in New Orleans. After making my way from the now defunct Wax Museum in the French Quarter, I made my way down Royal Street to the legendary Pharmacy Museum. Walking inside is nothing short of amazing, surrounded by antique bottles, medical utensils, rich oak cabinets, artwork, furniture, and so many more. The relics within the building are insane. Walking into the place, you might think it's just a storefront, but you see how massive the property is once inside, beyond the courtyard and up multiple levels. It goes without saying, I recommend everyone go to the Pharmacy Museum. So take a trip with me, and let's discover the history and haunts of the Pharmacy Museum. Of scholastic intrigue, curio oddities, an antique ledger just waiting to be opened, explored, in mankind's gleeful way. We turn the page and enter the doors of an adventure this day. The New Orleans Pharmacy Museum was a place where you can learn about the medicines of ages past. It was also even the place where the first licensed pharmacist in America practiced his craft aside from doing all things pharmaceutical. This individual also took part in performing some strange medical experimentations. Most of his favorite patients were women. One of the things that stood out about this place is the array of old-school medical equipment that was being used for these experimental procedures. The designs on some of them will blow your mind. Not only will you make the medical equipment make your hair stand on end, but a common occurrence is also the sound of groaning that can be heard on the third floor of the building. New Orleans, the perfect backdrop for all things haunted, spiritual, ghostly, and voodoo. The city is a melting pot of traditional and non-traditional medicines and an eclectic mix of nationalities and practices. What better place to explore the history and activity of the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum? New Orleans Pharmacy was originally owned by Louis DeFillo, Jr. He was responsible for his most significant contribution to the history and integrity of the pharmaceutical industry at the time. Until 1804, there were no laws governing the yield of pharmacy. Anyone could hang a shingle and open a shop. Medicine at the time was a range of procedures and tinctures that were rooted in wise tales and voodoo. But in 1804, Governor Claiborne of the state of Louisiana took measures to regulate the growing industry. He passed a law that required all pharmacists to take a licensing exam in order to practice as a pharmacist. Until this became law, the steps needed for one to become a pharmacist were informal and unenforced. To be a pharmacist, you simply had to apprentice with another pharmacist for 6 months. Then you would be free to compound and mix your own medicines and sell them in your own shop. There were no standards or regulations at all. This was a very dangerous practice because people would obviously receive incorrect doses and also receive the wrong medications quite often. When Governor Claiborne passed the law in 1804, he also established a board of reputable pharmacists and physicians whose sole purpose was to administer a 3-hour oral examination to those wishing to become pharmacists. The exam was given at the Capitolio in Jackson Square. Louis J. DeFillo, Jr. was the first person to pass the new licensing exam. This would have made the pharmacy the first one in the United States to be run on the basis of proven adequacy. The DeFillo family. Interestingly, Louis DeFillo had an older brother by the name of the same. The older brother and Jean, their father, opened their own pharmacy. This art pharmacy was located at 12 Toulouse Street, and the family lived there as well. In 1816, Louis Jr. graduated from the College of Pharmacy in Paris, where he had been studying. When he returned home from France, he passed the exam, and he started his own pharmacy with his older brother. This pharmacy was located on 63 Charter Street. Eventually, Louis DeFillo Jr. opened his own pharmacy, which was located at the present-day location of the Pharmacy Museum. DeFillo Jr. and his wife and children lived in the family quarters on the pharmacy property until 1855. In 1855, DeFillo sold it to Felicia Dubas and her husband, Dr. Joseph Dubas. Dr. Dubas lived in the pharmacy until he died from syphilis in 1867. One of the first reported ghosts of the New Orleans pharmacy is said to be of Dr. Dubas. Dr. Dubas is reported to have performed terrible experiments on pregnant slaves. His ghosts, is said, still haunt the property. The ghost of Dr. Dubas is dressed in clothes he normally wore, a brown suit and a matching brown hat. The apparition appears to be a middle-aged man with a mustache. The ghost of Dr. Dubas is said to be responsible for wreaking havoc in the museum after it is closed for the night. Staff say that he is the one that triggers a security alarm in the middle of the night. His spirit is also charged with throwing books on the floor and moving displays around. Sadly, pregnant slaves were tortured and used for performing medical experiments by Dr. Dubas. Today, it is noted that pregnant visitors to the museum have strong emotional reactions to being in the presence of these tortured souls. Dr. Dupas was rumored to perform these deadly experiments quite often and randomly. It is said that the lucky pregnant women were the ones that were left damaged for life. The unlucky ones died from the experiments. People began to speculate that when Dr. Dupas killed a pregnant woman, he would have a carriage waiting at the back of the shop, and for just the situation. And sadly, nobody knows just how many women died or where their remains were taken. Some people also report seeing the spirits of 2 children at the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum, a boy and a girl. They are said to wander the museum as well as the adjoining courtyard. Delfilio Jr. and his wife had 2 children die at the home when they lived there. They lost a son and a daughter. The theory is that these 2 spirits are the son and daughter of the original pharmacist. As can be expected, the New Orleans pharmacy was considered to be well equipped for the time. If you venture there today, you will get an eyeful of the medicines and devices that were used to help cure patients back in the day. When you think about New Orleans a couple of 100 years ago, you need to remember that sanitation was poor at the best. There was lots of flooding and humidity and frequent sailors. This combination made disease in the area rampant. It, as well known, cholera, smallpox, malaria, and yellow fever were all common and deadly diseases of the time. In the summer of 1853, 1 in 15 people died, and the number was much higher in more rural areas. Pharmacists were responsible for diagnosing and treating patients. The New Orleans Pharmacy Museum is still set up today, the way it was in the 1800s. You will find walls lined with bottles. These bottles are filled with some of the original cures and medicines that were used at the time. The pharmacy has 2 floors in the courtyard. The courtyard served as an interesting purpose. Since there was no sewage system in the place at the time, the streets were rancid and disease-filled. The courtyard gave residents repites from the additional. It is thought that the courtyard at the pharmacy was used to grow medical herbs growing within the courtyard. Staff reported finding bottles and syringes buried in the area. With New Orleans historically thriving on non-traditional therapies, the city is a melting pot of people, tradition, and cures to this day. Once the industry was regulated, it helped slightly. People would still frequent the pharmacy to find the ingredients needed to perform witchcraft and voodoo medicine remedies. Sadly, Dr. Dupas provided this and much more. Finding spiritual shops in New Orleans providing herbs, oils, and many other things used in practice and rite and in ritual are nothing to be afraid of, and are used for positive methods and outcome. If you tour the New Orleans pharmacy, be prepared. You can still see the metal table with the stirrups and metal collection buckets that used Dr. Dupas performed horrific experiments on pregnant slaves. The lucky one survived his torture with only lifelong scars. The unfortunate one died. Nobody knows for sure just how many women were killed with his experiments. Nobody knows where he buried the remains either, since he had a carriage quickly take them away. Dr. Dupas still does walk the floors of his pharmacy, and it is said that he knocks books on the floor and pushes people on the stairs. If you dare go to the pharmacy, you might also see the spirits of Dr. DeFilio's son and daughter. They like to roam the first floor of the building and the courtyard. Sadly, you might also hear the moans and cries of the poor tortured pregnant women that perish during Dr. Dupas' experiments. They are forever doomed to walk the pharmacy, crying to their babies. If you are expecting to be prepared to feel a strong, visceral reaction when entering. The museum stands as a piece of iconic history in New Orleans. Much like the surrounding buildings around it, the mystery, blood, hope, ingenuity, and rebirth is very much a part of its legacy. Please visit the pharmacy. I highly recommend it. Tell them Ryan Mckern sent you. And thank you for joining me in the dark once again, my friends. Please subscribe for weekly updates, new episodes of all things horror. I'd like to thank hauntednation.blogspot.com, hellolittlehome.com, nolaghost.com, and research in this episode. And until we dwell in the darkness again, my friends, I'm Ryan Mckern. Au revoir.